print community journalism is suited to the sense of community, where people get a paper in their hand and can read the local happenings and discover new things in the area.
Good morning, folks. This is Getty Schweikowskis for the podcast of Hudson Valley One, and I'm very glad to have a new friend here as my guest, and that's Claudia Ansorge, who lives in Energy Square out in Midtown. Hi, Claudia. How are you?
Hi, Getty. Good morning.
Good morning. Now, the great thing for me about Claudia, among other things, is that she's a journalist and writes this column called Walking Around?
Walkabout.
Walkabout. That's right, Walkabout. Sorry.
It's
and
new.
they're really terrific stories about exploring Kingston.
Right.
And I really thought that they're terrific columns for us to have. You know, people don't use their eyes enough. And sometimes they need somebody who is less familiar with the area and who sees things that they don't, and it kind of gets that memory bank working, and they remember, oh yeah, that's kind of...
Yeah, I knew people who haven't seen it, like me. You know, sharing my enthusiasms is really easy, because Kingston is a wonderful city to explore. And I guess I wasn't prepared for that when I came in and got an apartment at Energy Square and began to take these walks. I was always a walker, but not in Kingston. And what it has done to me is that I get up and want to get out there, seeing the streets and finding. It started with small attentions, just discovering the cemetery to walk in, and the shops along the way, Broadway, and just discovering Broadway and the different districts in the city. But as I keep doing it every day,
I have found that small cities in New York State each have a character of their own, and it's just a matter of discovering them. You know, Newburgh is really amazing, for instance. Some people don't know about it, and Tarrytown, and all kinds of really terrific places. Where when I go to Florida or I've been in California, the places are uninteresting. Small cities are really boring. They're all the same.
Right.
They're all chain stores and automotive oriented, and Kingston is not that.
And Kingston's an old city, which has those layers of discovery. And I was thinking when I was writing the column for this week, and when I was growing up, my parents had one of these Russian nesting dolls. They're called Matryoshka dolls.
Sure, yeah.
And it really feels like that in Kingston. I mean, there's another doll to find. There's another layer to open up, and because it has that history, and it has the life now, and it has community and diversity, there's just so many dolls inside. I keep taking out the next one, getting down to the smaller one and smaller one. Yeah, and the cities that are created or newer just don't have that. It's the size of Kingston, the history of Kingston, and what I'm discovering is the spirit or the soul of Kingston as I meet the people who are rooted here, either in businesses or living here or just kind of run into, like you, when I came in to meet you by chance, I mean,
that was really interesting.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was terrific. And it turned out that we had so much in common in terms of background.
Right.
And it must be interesting for you to sit on an editorial meeting and see what we talk about and see how in some ways it's similar to all papers, and in other ways it's quite different.
Yeah, my own history certainly was grounded in community journalism for decades, and that intimacy with community and weekly journalism, and just the connection that makes to a community is unique. And the print edition, and now the whole digital world and the social media side of it that's added and new and has an excitement about it, but it's print community journalism is suited to the sense of community, where people get a paper in their hand and can read the local happenings and discover new things in the area. But meeting you was just, for me, just a big exhale. I mean, it's rare to meet another publisher in community journalism, and then suddenly you have, seems like everything in common. It's really nice.
The digital thing is interesting because you see more and more people, younger people particularly, who are completely digital natives.
Right.
And you realize that much as you and I love the print and the word, and we wait for the paper to come back from the printer and look at it page by page.
I know that feeling.
It's right. Some surprises. We look at it. It's a package we've made for people.
Right.
And digital is different. The feeling is different. The way to do it is different. And I don't know whether I fear or I hope, but that somehow will be managed, that transition. It's uncomfortable to me, but it's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stretch. It's a thing that bringing in a new technology. And I know at the meeting yesterday, we were talking about the early days of putting out a newspaper, which seem like, they're prehistoric. And looking to the future is kind of the same feeling of the unknown. How are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? And then it begins to get absorbed, if it's right, if it's a fit. And if people are picking up their phone or their computer to read something, words and speech and communication can happen on all these different. I mean, the word platforms was never there with print journalism. Now everything's on a platform. But it's that, I guess the print surface is a platform of a kind where you're holding it on a table or in your lap. So I think it's learning some technical skills. That's, it's like learning how to type or learning how to, do
it's different, though.
It's absolutely different. I know it is.
You think of when the glue gun and the wax and the Verityper machine and the printing, the whole thing it's something we grew up with, and therefore it's familiar, and we sort of have a kind of a comfort with it, which we don't have with digital, and yet the digital is going to be, I don't know how the degree. I think people say that eventually the print editions will die out in many places, and just digital will be left. So we better, it's like being stuck on a desert island. We better learn how to do it.
Yeah. And we are. The paper is. I mean, HV1 is digital and it's print, and it's both are working and growing. Discovering. I've been doing a lot of recently, especially for this last column that's going to be coming out next week. Just seeing what the businesses are in Kingston that are art manufacturing businesses. This is the focus right now. And it reminded me of what's going on with the paper. I mean, these are businesses that are producing basically a piece of art one way or another, or art mediums for people, or art media to use for people to use, like these R&F paints. They have in caustic paints and light bright neon studio. I mean, these are incredible environments once you cross the door and see what's going on inside. And there's a sense of growing with what the world is doing, as they're producing what they're producing, but remaining consistent to their original purpose. And I think the newspaper business has the same combination of creativity, and growth and hearing the community and reaching it however they need to be reached.
I love the word craft because I think it applies. A newspaper is not an art; it's a craft.
A craft, but both of those are creative. Whether it's the artisan side or the creative side, as it's seen with visual arts or performance art. Those are creative, entrepreneurial efforts when you're in the business side of things. Yeah. But the combination with a product that's creative, and I think newspaper publishing is a creative category of work. It's a combination. You're creating a newspaper. You're creating an experience for people.
If you look at art, has done that transition too. That is, there are artists who produce a product, and you can look at the product and feel it and see what's going on with it. But there are some artists who just say, draw a line from here to here and another line from here to there. That's it. They don't do anything.
Right.
They just say, this is how you do it. And that's art too.
No, that is art. I guess I'm currently just immersed in my experience of the Light Bright studio, the Neon studio,
mm-hmm.
where there's you need to know the technology of neon and the science of it to work with it as an art form. And maybe I'm drawing too many parallels to publishing, but in publishing you have to know what you're working with, to put the words in and make the product happen. So when you walk into the Neon studio, these works of art are there on display, with all this neon color running through and words. A lot of the things that are up on the walls are phrases and words and just the expression of what you're doing in publishing, but in neon. But it has that combination of technology and creativity, and I think publishing has that. And what I'm finding is Kingston has, as you walk on a street, it has all these things going on, the changes that are wrought by technology and advancement and industry and those kind of words. But they build something else. They build a community. They build a city.
Well, maybe one of the things that crafts have in common is that they're often on the cusp of insolvency.
Then you're a true artist.
Right? And you have to find a way out of it.
Right, right. You do.
You don't accept that you're
I never thought of that.
And you fight against it. So
right.
that's, it's one of
right.
It can be applied to other areas of life too.
Well, it might be a right brain, left brain kind of balance. You got to find it. Maybe the corporate body of whatever business you're in has that same thing. It has to have both to stay in business. And the challenge of keeping up with the bottom line is definitely there in publishing for sure. Yeah.
Well, I guess one of the things about this area is that we have a mix of people coming in who, in my view, contribute a lot. That is, many of them come from New York City,
right?
Where things are kind of what the world will be in 5 or 10 years in terms of technology is what's going on there now.
Right.
And that when people with those abilities and that kind of context come up here, they can afford an apartment that nobody else can, and there's the gentrification problem. On the other hand, they really, without those people, I think we'd be stuck in a more primitive place.
Right.
Yeah.
You're kind of parochial and kind of in your own little world without that kind of growth that kind of brings in. But I think people, the new wave of whatever's happening in people coming up, the post-COVID or the midst of COVID moves up to places in the Hudson Valley, and including Kingston, is to find also what's here, and bring what they're bringing. It's a I think even the size of Kingston compared to New York, it has the flavor of a city, and it has a certain energy of a city. It doesn't have the size and the scale and the people, but there's a way you could relate to it. And what I've also found, I'm praising Kingston because I'm really in love with the city, but there's an inside-outside sense of how you could actually be outside on the trails and the attention that's paid within the city parameters to outside experience. Like walking on the Empire Trail and going down by the railroad trail, down by the Rondout, and you could step into that in Kingston, and at the same time step out of it very easily. And I think for city people, it's that it's not that you need to go into Central Park to find that, or Prospect Park. Here you could just walk to the river and find it. It's right there and accessible. So I think upstate has the nature and the history overall, but Kingston has that city spin to it for people that are coming in, a familiarity. And I think maybe that's why, for me, it's such an attractive place to be grounded in my life right now, because I basically came from a city or suburban or urban or small town kind of
North
place.
Jersey, yeah.
Well, it was Central Jersey, and it was Red Bank, and it was, for the period that I was there in publishing, Red Bank was went from being a town that was called Dead Bank to being one of the destination places in New Jersey, and it is still on that grow. Mm-hmm. It just got involved with all kinds of improvements and downtown renovations and all kinds of business investments, and it became part of a chain of cities that include Asbury Park and Red Bank in that area. But it was, again, Red Bank was a mile square, and there was a lot going in there. 75 restaurants were in Red Bank, for instance. So it was a certain size city, but Kingston is another level up. But it's not the big Chicago, New York kind of places. And for people living in the city, I think that's a real attraction. The culture is here, the diversity of whatever the experience, whether it's the nature of the shopping experience, the dining experience, the arts and entertainment experience. It really broadens it out. So Kingston adds to the area of the other towns that are here. It has more of an urban feel to it.
You mentioned the layers that history brings.
Yeah, oh boy.
I spent in my youth 10 years in New York City, and mostly in the Village and South Village and East Village, and it's unrecognizable almost now that it's completely changed. And though the Village has more layers of history than most places, it still doesn't have that retain the oldest with the newest the way Kingston does.
Kingston preserves its history, and the more I'm discovering that. I mean, it's really, Sojourner Truth and there's so many aspects of history that are opening up. Yesterday, I stood in the snow in front of the 3 statues that are in the park.
Academy.
Academy, where it's Peter Stuyvesant and Henry Hudson and Clinton, and these figures, and then I read your article in HV1 online about how those statues came to be there, and it's just you realize how history is important to the city. Yeah. It's not only the Stockade District and the Senate building, and Matt Dilling was telling me, he said, ask Getty about the pear. Which I didn't know about. So, maybe you want to share that story that's in the Senate building, that was preserved from the colonial period as an artifact, as a relic from a certain period of time here. So I'm going to go look for the pear. I don't know quite what it is, whether it is exactly what he's talking about, a real pear preserved. But it just seemed to me a very tender thought that a city cares, about where it came from, and I think Kingston really does.
I learned much of what I learned about history. The most rewarding, intense time was when I worked with the historian Alpha Evers on his Woodstock book. What we did was we printed 62 episodes of history, the whole book.
Oh.
With the permission of the publisher Peter Mayer, who was a friend, and so every week, my wife and I would take turns. We'd go talk to Alf, and he'd go through his copy and says, "Oh, forgive me, dear, for this hen scratching." He'd tell my wife, and I'd make little changes, and he'd change them back and stuff like that. But richness of it, like the individual players who would come in, the family feuds, the changes in technology, and changes in the sense of distance, and the sense of, you know, how just simply how the fabric of life changed. It was fascinating. It was absolutely wonderful.
Wow. Wow. The book that I've been referencing is you know, just recently, which you had told me about, was Streetwise.
Yeah.
Which is you know, just a compilation of all kind of anecdotes and history and little facts about the streets of Kingston, one at a time, yeah, alphabetically arranged. And there it is. You know, I was, last week's column was on Greenkill Avenue, and there were, you know, all these things you could find out about Greenkill, who lived on this block, literally, what they did in 1928, if you want to find it. The book is at the library, and it was written by the town historian who died recently at 103. Yeah.
He was a wonderful man, Ed.
Yeah. So that was an experience of another turn into history that was really, really special.
Well, one of the things about a place like this is that it tries to be more careful about whether change is good or not. And sometimes it goes a little bit to the extreme and says, you know, any change is bad. And clearly you have to have some kind of change, and that's come up in issues like development issues of all kinds. But you have to somehow find some way of keeping the carcass going, and that it can't be all preservation. There has to be change of some kind, just as there is in people's lives. And I think we haven't hit that happy medium yet.
Well, my experience, again, it's new. I mean, I haven't been here, you know, for my lifetime, but there are thoughtful people, it seems to me, that I'm meeting that are players at a level that have to do with shaping the city. Yeah. You know, I haven't met the political side of it, and, you know where it's existent with that. You know, but as I meet people that are involved, you know, including the people at Rupco, you know, Kevin O'Connor and Ann Bailey, who's, you know, very influential and involved in the Midtown Arts District and the shaping of that, and just people who really have a lot of things that they consider on the decisions they make about their life and how it'll affect the city. I mean, these are people that are have put down their stake here, you know, in Kingston.
Yeah.
And it isn't that they care only about their own little universe. They care about what it is that's happening as they're part of the amalgam. So it's, you know, what is it to make the network work, not just your own little string in it. And so that makes a big difference, you know, where there's consideration for the consequences of actions. Yeah. And as always, it's not universal, but it seems, in my experience, that there are more and more people that I'm meeting that are that way.
Yeah.
And it's an expression on the streets that you're here. You can see how the city is product of that consideration, whether it's the historians or the local political, you know, players, or the people who are the developers or the entrepreneurs or the artists. People are less, you know, in the suburban areas that I've ever lived when I was growing up, there was a sense of just people had their own lives. You know, they were just all kind of separate. And then when I wound up, my first grounding up here was in Woodstock. I came up in 2004 and discovered the Hudson Valley. I'd lived at sea level most of my life in New York or Long Island or along the Jersey Shore, and I came up to visit someone for a weekend and just felt I had discovered where I belonged as far as mountains and nature and community. I mean, Woodstock is a very different character than Kingston.
So in some ways, it's a little harder to get into.
It's harder to get into, right? It's for newcomers. It is, and it prides itself in that in a certain way. So it was a feeling of belonging, but not quite belonging. The way I feel like I'm belonging almost instantly in Kingston. But that it's just a feeling of what it is to be in a city where there is that sense of the bigger picture. And Woodstock has it too, but it was kind of grown and more.
But Woodstock
more
is
apparent.
the only town in Ulster County where, in the residential areas, you can't see the houses because they put a bunch of trees in front of them and a driveway, and you really don't see very much.
Right.
And everywhere else, people take pride in their house being close to the road.
Mm.
So it's that completely different sense of privacy and of priorities. Yeah. But Kingston is, you don't have that distance at all. Yeah. And there are consequences for that, and it certainly allows for a more rapid mingling of different people and ideas.
Yeah, and cultures. I mean, that's what when you walk down Broadway, as frequently as I do, it's just this feeling of the world has poured into the city with all kinds of, just the restaurant side. I mean, the Turkish restaurant and the Mexican restaurant and the Chinese restaurant and the Japanese restaurant, and it's just it's all over the place. Then you go into the neighborhoods, and one of the things for me that's yet another excitement is that within the depth of the neighborhood, things are going on, like a theater company and the churches and certain small stores, but that have personalities. And you discover a dairy, a dairy kind of center, that people are, bringing in milk, from places to distribute. I mean, it just all winds up, but it spreads out. And then as the seasons change and the neighborhood spills out onto the street, and you're there and you just see people out, and that's different, you're right, than living in Woodstock. If you come downtown, you see that. Or if you go to one of the creeks to get into the water. But here you just kind of walk through this flowing river of life that has a diversity, and it's wonderful.
Now there's this new column you're writing, you're almost finishing. Tell me what that's about.
Well, it's this time it's called Inside Out, which is going inside to the places that I've been really, when you get up and it says 0 degrees literally on my phone, Kingston 0, the big 0 on it. It was one of these things that I know I'm going to walk. I dress so the cold doesn't really affect me. I mean, if it's icy and snow and it's that kind of weather, I don't go out. But pretty much 100% of the time I'm walking, whatever the weather is. But 0 is 0. And so for the column, I realized I had been accumulating these experiences of walking past places, and now I'm kind of knocking on the door to find out who's inside. Mm-hmm. So there's certainly it's
like visiting a hibernating bear.
It is. Who wakes up and shares their time with me. It's really nice. So there are different places I'm bringing into this column. One is Matt Dilling at Neon, Neon Studio. That was an incredible time with him.
That's so visually exciting.
It's visually exciting, and he is like the Rosetta Stone to something. I don't know what world he's opening up, but it was an interview that I taped and transcribed, and it just was filled with just so much information and so much insight and philosophy and compassion for the city. I mean, all kinds of things. And there's a store on just in right down from the newspaper, Sweet Marissa's Bakery, mm-hmm. which I just had the same experience with her, to go in and see who is this person who is creating these wonderful things that appear in her window. You go inside and there's an experience inside of that. And the thing that stopped me and pulled me in and actually pulled her into this column was it's a bakery, so it's all edibles, but she has she's curated, so to speak, the outside gift area with things that, that are not edible. So in the window, there were these frames that looked like they were pastries and Kleenex boxes. And I went in and I said, are these for sale? And I didn't know whether they were made out of icing. Well, it turned out she just decided to take plaster of Paris and pipe them into these different things, like as if she were making a cake. And they are incredible. I mean, it's just taking her own experience and talents as a baker and putting them into a line of things because it interested her. So there these curlicues and all these kind of things. So we talked about that and where she came from and how she got into this, and so the inside stories of these places that I passed by or did pass by and got stopped by. And then it's inside that nesting doll, back inside the nesting doll, and there's another doll inside, and there's another doll inside. And so it's that kind of column.
Having a store both around here, it's both an opportunity for self-expression, who you are, what you're into. And it's also a business, that is, you want to sell a good or a service.
Right.
And it seems that the first component is quite strong here, where, for instance, if you go in a mall store, there's absolutely nothing of that.
No, there's just, here these are individual expressions. And in Marissa's case, she opened right before COVID, and she had to immediately close. This is a person who came in to start a small business in a city, a very distinct environment when you walk in. It's a beautiful place to stop into. The smells and the presentation and what's being sold there. But then to be slapped with the business reality that she's put all of this investment, gotten this thing, and has to close her doors for 3 months. The people that do small businesses, I admire greatly. I think it's a real part of the American landscape. It's certainly acknowledged as a big part of what makes up the economy, people starting small businesses. And the news is all about the big players, but and that ties into community journalism. That's where you look. What's going on right in your own backyard? And
I guess more people now. There seems to be this trend that people don't want to work for somebody doing kind of a routinized job.
Right.
And one of the few ways out is to have a business.
Right.
So there are many people who try. Unfortunately, a large proportion don't make it.
Right.
Because of the economic aspects of it.
Yeah.
But it's
well, this whole change in the business model with remote business now, where people can do so many businesses without leaving their home that they used to go to work in, and so they're isolated in a way. But for the experience of getting out from their own house, doing their work, so they're not sitting at a desk or a cubicle, or having that kind of experience, but to be closed into the domestic environment is still a confined space, and to walk into I'm talking Kingston here, but to walk into Kingston and see the texture and the color and the humanity, the touch of life that isn't in front of a computer, or just, very, very on its own. It's
we're used to contrasting mall situation, large aggregates of chain stores,
or Amazon
to small business.
Right.
But the most rapidly growing category in sales is Amazon. It's the
convenience of that and the COVID
it's
part
online
of it.
business.
Right. Yeah.
So that one of my daughters, a younger daughter, is she does everything through little packages that come to the house. You can tell from the shape of the package, guess what it is, and that's it. But I don't think she's been in a store to buy at all recently, and it just kind of maybe, you know, there's this third element, third mentality that I think is the most, you know, for better or worse, is growing more rapidly than the small store thing, and the malls, which are declining.
Well, I think there's a change in retail, you know, for sure. I mean, that's you know, that's come, the tsunami that's come in and, you know, kind of washed across the face of small community businesses, and but at the same time, you know, a person is a person. You know, at some point, the need to touch and feel and be, you know, engaged in an experience of personal relationship with something. Yeah. And someone might get the convenience of getting little packages, you know, from Amazon, or big packages, or whatever, everything in their life, from, you know, from their meals, their clothes, their, you know, medical supplies, whatever it is, everything comes through the mail. Is to go in and pick up a frame that's made by, you know, a baker who's experimenting with plaster is its own unique experience. And I think there is a piece of the soul that is fed with that isn't fed the other way, that will have expression, needs expression, you know, and that match will be made. And fortunately, there are people that are willing to get up and do it, you know, get up every morning and do that, and offer that to other people like me, a walker through Kingston, to be stopped and say, I'm not going to stop at an Amazon display, you know, the same way. And, you know, there's just a lightness that happens, a feeling of joy. It's a feeling of joy, you know, that humans need, you know, and our times need.
I've been told that although people enjoy the podcasts, I have too many white male politician type people. So I think that's right. I think we had a composition not only of women and minorities, but of artists and people who are eccentric. Any eccentric makes a better interview, and you sort of qualify as a nascent eccentric, I think. So thank you very much.
Oh,
thank you very much, folks, for attending this HV1 podcast, and see you around.